Have you ever heard of a place so strange, so unsettling, that it seems to defy all logic? Today, we're traveling to a picturesque corner of Scotland, to a seemingly ordinary bridge with an extraordinarily dark secret. This is the story of the Overtoun Bridge, infamously known as the Dog Suicide Bridge. Since the 1950s, an estimated 600 dogs have leaped from this very bridge. They walk calmly across, then, without warning, they jump. Most fall 50 feet onto the rocky gorge below. What's even stranger, some dogs that survived the fall have been known to climb back up and jump a second time. What could possibly compel these animals to take such a drastic, unexplainable leap? Let's set the scene. Overtoun Bridge is an elegant Victorian structure built in 1895, leading to the grand Overtoun House in Dumbarton, Scotland. It's a beautiful spot, surrounded by lush greenery and the peaceful sound of the Overtoun Burn flowing beneath. But for local residents, this beauty is overshadowed by a long history of tragedy. For decades, they have watched in horror as beloved family pets, one after another, have made the same fateful jump, almost always from the same specific spot on the right-hand side of the bridge, between the final two parapets. The breeds vary, from Labradors and Collies to Golden Retrievers, but the behavior is eerily consistent. Owners describe their dogs becoming suddenly agitated or transfixed, as if drawn by an unseen force. Before they can react, their companion is gone. One owner, Donna Cooper, shared her terrifying experience. While walking her collie, Ben, he suddenly bolted and leaped over the parapet. She said his paw was bleeding and he was yelping and screeching. It was just horrific. Luckily, Ben survived, but many others were not so fortunate. Naturally, people have tried to find an explanation. Local folklore offers a supernatural one. They speak of the White Lady of Overtoun, a grieving widow's ghost said to haunt the bridge and the estate for over a century. Some believe her sorrowful presence unsettles the animals, driving them to jump. Celtic mythology also speaks of places like Overtown, where the veil between our world and the spirit world is thin. Could these dogs be sensing something we can't? This theory gained a darker, more tragic dimension in 1994. In a heartbreaking incident, a local man threw his infant son from the bridge believing the baby was the Antichrist. He then attempted to jump himself. This horrific event solidified the bridge's reputation as a place of profound sorrow and led many to believe that a dark energy truly resides there. The sign now posted at the bridge, "Please keep your dogs on a lead," feels like a chilling understatement. But what about a scientific explanation? Experts have flocked to Overtoun to solve the mystery. One of the leading theories involves scent. Animal behaviorist Dr. David Sands investigated the case and suggested that the dogs are not intentionally trying to end their lives. Instead, he believes they are being lured by a powerful smell. Beneath the bridge, the undergrowth is teeming with wildlife, particularly mink. Mink secrete a very strong, musky odor from their anal glands, especially when they feel threatened. Dr. Sands conducted an experiment where he presented various scents to a group of dogs. A staggering 70% of them were intensely drawn to the mink scent, ignoring all others. The theory goes that the high stone walls of the bridge block the dogs' sight and sound, amplifying their sense of smell. They catch the intoxicating scent of mink below, and their powerful prey drive kicks in. They leap over the wall, not realizing the deadly drop on the other side. This theory also helps explain why the jumps happen from a specific spot. The mink are most likely to be nesting in the dry areas beneath the bridge's arches, concentrating their scent in that location. Furthermore, the breeds most commonly involved in these incidents, Labradors, Collies, and other retrievers, are scent hounds, bred for their exceptional sense of smell and strong hunting instincts. It seems plausible that their natural instincts are simply overwhelming them. However, the scent theory doesn't satisfy everyone. Why this particular bridge? There are thousands of bridges over rivers with mink living nearby all over Scotland and the UK. Why don't we see this phenomenon happening anywhere else? And what about the reports of dogs appearing possessed or hypnotized? The mystery is far from solved. Some researchers have even explored the possibility of acoustics, suggesting a specific sound frequency produced by the bridge or the burn below could be disorienting the dogs. So, what are we left with? A beautiful bridge with a tragic legacy. A place where science and the supernatural seem to collide. Is it the haunting scent of mink, driving dogs to follow their instincts over the edge? Or is it something more ethereal? A ghostly presence, a thin veil between worlds, or an energy we simply don't understand? Perhaps the truth is a combination of factors. The unique structure of the bridge, the potent smells from below, and the unsettling atmosphere of the location could all be creating a perfect, tragic storm. The Overtoun Bridge mystery reminds us that even in our modern scientific world, there are some puzzles that resist easy answers. It's a place where the line between what is real and what is imagined becomes blurred, leaving us to wonder about the hidden forces that shape our world and the senses of the animals we share it with. What do you think is happening at Overtoun Bridge? Let me know your theories in the comments below. It's a fascinating and somber mystery that continues to captivate and mystify us all. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. Stay curious and stay safe. Video begins perhaps with a slow, eerie shot of a cornfield at dusk, then transitioning to a weathered cemetery gate. Have you ever heard of a place so unsettling, so charged with strange energy that locals simply call it the Devil's Graveyard? Forget the ghost stories you tell around a campfire. This is something else entirely. Deep in the heart of America's Corn Belt, tucked away in Iowa, lies a small, forgotten cemetery. But this isn't just any old burial ground. They say it's a gateway, a place where the veil between our world and another is terrifyingly thin. Transition to archival photos or slightly blurred reenactments of the area. The official name is Stull Cemetery, but no one really calls it that. For generations, whispers have circulated about this place, stories passed down from parent to child, tales of strange lights dancing between the tombstones, and disembodied voices carried on the wind. It is the kind of local legend that makes you lock your doors a little tighter at night. But what if it's more than just a legend? Cut to a more direct, engaging shot of the narrator. The story goes back to the 19th century. They say the town of Stull was one of the 7 gateways to hell on Earth. It's said that a tree once stood in the cemetery that was used for hangings, a focal point for dark energy. Even after it was cut down, the stories didn't stop. In fact, they grew stranger. People started talking about a set of stone steps, hidden somewhere in the overgrown grass. Steps that lead down. But here it's the chilling part. No one who has ever found them has ever found the bottom. They just keep going, descending into absolute darkness. Show artistic impressions of the steps to nowhere, or footage of someone searching through tall grass. Now, I know what you might be thinking. It's just an old spooky story. And maybe it is. But the eyewitness accounts are incredibly consistent and genuinely unsettling. For decades, people brave enough or foolish enough to visit have reported the same phenomena. They describe an overwhelming feeling of being watched, a sudden bone-chilling drop in temperature even on a warm night, and the distinct unnerving sound of footsteps crunching on leaves right behind them, only to turn and find no one there. Showcase some found footage style shots, slightly shaky, looking around an old cemetery at night. But the most famous and persistent legend is what happens every October, especially around Halloween. Locals swear that a thick crimson mist rises from the ground. It isn't fog from the nearby fields. They say it glows with a faint internal light and clings low to the earth, swirling around the ancient headstones. It's been described as looking like the very ground is bleeding. Imagine standing in the middle of a cornfield miles from anywhere and seeing that. Create a visual effect of a faint red mist rolling across the ground. And here's where it gets even weirder, especially for people like me who try to document these things. There's a widely held belief, almost a rule, about the Iowa Demon Cemetery. No camera works there past midnight. It's not just one or two instances. We're talking countless reports over the years. Digital cameras that were fully charged suddenly die. Film cameras produce nothing but black, overexposed, or strangely corrupted images. Audio recorders pick up only static, or worse, whispers that weren't heard at the time of recording. Show examples of corrupted digital files, static on a screen, or blank photo prints. Think about that. In our modern age, where everything is captured on a smartphone, this place seems to have a built-in defense system against being recorded after the witching hour. Is it an electromagnetic field? A geological anomaly? Or is something actively preventing its secrets from being exposed? Investigators, paranormal researchers, and curious teenagers have all tried to capture definitive proof, and almost all have left with nothing but a terrifying story and a dead battery. Return to the narrator, speaking with a more serious, contemplative tone. Of course, there are skeptics. Some historians say the legends were largely fabricated or exaggerated in the 1970s by university students looking for a thrill. They point out that the town was actually named after its first postmaster, not for anything sinister. They argue that the hot steps are likely just the remnants of an old church foundation, and the red mist is simply a natural phenomenon mixed with an overactive imagination. And they might be right. But that doesn't explain the sheer volume and consistency of the personal experiences. Show a split screen, one side with a rational historical document, the other with a spooky artistic rendering of a ghostly figure. It doesn't explain the feeling. People who have no prior knowledge of the legends visit and report the same sense of dread. They talk about the oppressive silence, a quiet so deep it feels like the world is holding its breath. They speak of seeing shadowy figures darting just at the edge of their vision, always gone when they turn to look directly. Could mass hysteria or suggestion account for all of it? For so many different people over so many years? Show slow-motion shots of walking through a cemetery, focusing on weathered tombstones and overgrown ivy. The line between folklore and reality is often blurry, and nowhere is that line more faded than in the cornfields of Iowa, at the place they call the Devil's Graveyard. It's a place that seems to exist outside of time, a relic of old fears and dark tales. The cemetery itself is on private property now, heavily guarded against trespassers, which only adds to its mystique. The legends have made it a target for vandalism, and the landowners have understandably had enough. The gateway, it seems, is closed to visitors. Final shots of the sun setting over the cornfield, casting long shadows. So, what do you think? Is it just a collection of campfire stories that got out of hand? Or is there something truly ancient and unexplainable lurking in that small patch of consecrated ground? A place that rejects our technology and preys on our deepest fears. A true gateway in the cornfield. The mystery of Stull Cemetery remains one of America's most enduring and terrifying legends, a chilling reminder that some places are best left undisturbed, and some secrets are meant to stay buried. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the unexplained. If you have your own local legends you think the world needs to hear, drop them in the comments below. And if you enjoy exploring the mysteries that hide in the shadows, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more adventures into the unknown. Stay curious and stay safe. Welcome back, truth seekers. Today, we're journeying back to a place that has haunted the public imagination for decades. 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York. We all know the story, or at least we think we do. The books, the movies. They painted a picture of supernatural terror that became a cultural phenomenon. But what if I told you the Hollywood version is just the tip of the iceberg? What if the real story, the raw, unfiltered terror experienced by the Lutz family was captured in their own words, long before the cameras started rolling? Tonight, we're not just revisiting a ghost story. We are opening a time capsule of fear. We're delving into the Lutz family files, a collection of recently unearthed audio recordings that reveal the untold story of the Amityville haunting. These aren't interviews conducted years after the fact. These are secret, personal tapes recorded by George and Kathy Lutz themselves, chronicling their 28 days inside that infamous house. This is their story, in their own voices, as it happened. To truly understand the weight of these tapes, we have to rewind to December 1975. George and Kathy Lutz, a young couple with 3 children, thought they had found their dream home. A beautiful, spacious Dutch colonial on the Long Island waterfront, available at an unbelievable price. The catch? Just 13 months earlier, it had been the scene of a horrific crime. Ronald DeFeo Jr. had taken the lives of 6 of his family members within those very walls. The Lutzes, aware of the house's history, believed they could make it a place of love and new beginnings. They moved in on December 18th. They lasted only 28 days. They fled in the middle of the night, leaving behind all their possessions, claiming they were driven out by paranormal forces too terrifying to endure. Their story quickly became legendary. Jay Anson's 1977 book, The Amityville Horror, was a bestseller, followed by the blockbuster 1979 film. The world was captivated by tales of swarms of flies in winter, strange odors, cold spots, green slime oozing from the walls, a hidden red room in the basement, and George Lutz's disturbing personality changes. A priest attempting to bless the house was allegedly told to get out by a demonic voice. Kathy levitated. The children were tormented. The youngest daughter, Missy, even had an imaginary friend named Jody, described as a demonic, pig-like creature with glowing red eyes. It was a terrifying narrative, but over the years, skepticism grew. Critics and debunkers emerged, questioning the family's claims. Lawyers involved in the DeFeo case, neighbors, and subsequent homeowners of 112 Ocean Avenue reported no paranormal activity. The story was labeled a hoax, a money-making scheme cooked up by the Lutzes and their associates. For many, the Amityville Horror became just that, a story, a fictional campfire tale. But what if the truth was more complex? This is where the tapes come in. These recordings were made by George Lutz, not for public consumption, but as a personal audio diary. He was trying to make sense of the inexplicable events unfolding around his family. He wanted to document the strange occurrences, perhaps to convince himself he wasn't losing his mind. For over 40 years, these tapes remained private, a closely guarded family secret. Now, they've been brought to light, offering an unprecedented real-time account of those 28 days. Listening to these tapes is a chilling experience. It is one thing to read about these events in a book or see them dramatized on screen. It's another thing entirely to hear the raw emotion, the confusion, and the escalating fear in George and Kathy's own voices. In the early recordings, you can hear their initial optimism, their hopes for their new home. But quickly, the tone shifts. George describes a persistent, bone-chilling cold that seemed to follow him from room to room, a cold that no amount of firewood could chase away. He talks about waking up every morning at 3:15 a.m., the estimated time of the DeFeo murders, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. Kathy's voice, often trembling, recounts the nightmares that plagued her, vivid and disturbing dreams of the murders that had taken place in their bedrooms. She speaks of unseen hands touching her, of a constant feeling of being watched. You can hear the strain in their marriage as the house seems to turn them against each other. George, a normally gentle family man, becomes moody and withdrawn, his voice on the tapes growing deeper, more agitated. He describes an obsession with the fireplace, a constant need to keep it roaring day and night. One of the most unsettling aspects revealed in the tapes is the impact on the children. While the book and movie touched on this, hearing George and Kathy discuss their children's terror is heartbreaking. They talk about their sons, Daniel and Christopher, suffering from mysterious afflictions and behavioral changes. They describe 5-year-old Missy's conversations with Jody. In the recordings, George and Kathy grapple with this. Is Jody just an imaginary friend, a coping mechanism for a child in a new, strange house? Or is it something more sinister? They describe finding strange hoof prints in the snow outside Missy's window, prints that started and stopped with no explanation. The tapes chronicle the escalation. The strange smells, sometimes like cheap perfume, other times like decay. The sounds of furniture moving upstairs when everyone was downstairs. The front door being ripped from its hinges. The mysterious green slime that would appear on the carpets and walls. In one particularly harrowing recording, you can hear the sheer panic in their voices as they describe a crucifix on the wall turning upside down on its own. These aren't polished, scripted performances. This is the sound of a family coming undone. You hear them arguing, trying to rationalize what's happening. Is it the plumbing? The wind? Is it just their nerves, frayed by the house's dark history? But as the days pass, their attempts at logical explanations crumble, replaced by a growing acceptance that they are dealing with something beyond their comprehension. What makes these tapes so compelling is that they predate the media frenzy. This wasn't for a book deal or a movie contract. This was a family in crisis, documenting their own ordeal. The recordings provide a powerful counter-argument to the hoax claims. Why would a family fabricate such detailed emotional accounts in private if their goal was public deception? The tapes capture a rawness and vulnerability that feels undeniably authentic. One of the most debated elements of the Amityville story is the Red Room, a small hidden room in the basement painted entirely red. The Lutz family claimed their dog was terrified of it and that they felt a palpable sense of unease near it. Skeptics later pointed out that this room was just a small closet under the stairs and wasn't there during the DeFeo's time. However, on the tapes, George's voice is filled with genuine confusion and fear as he describes discovering this space. He speaks of it as a passageway to hell. Whether it was a physical portal or a psychological one, for George Lutz, the terror it induced was very, very real. The final recordings from their last night in the house are fragmented and chaotic. You can hear shouting, crying, the sounds of things crashing. It's the audio footprint of a family fleeing for their lives. They describe a cacophony of terrifying sounds, shadowy figures, and a final, overwhelming event that forced them to abandon everything they owned and never return. They never fully disclosed what happened on that last night, saying it was too horrible to repeat. Listening to the chaos on that final tape, you begin to understand why. So, what are we to make of these recordings? Do they prove that 112 Ocean Avenue was truly haunted by a demonic entity? Or do they document a case of shared delusion, a family's psychological breakdown under immense stress, amplified by the house's gruesome history? The truth, as it often is, may lie somewhere in between. The tapes don't give us easy answers. There are no ghostly voices captured on the recordings, no definitive proof of the paranormal. What they do provide is something arguably more powerful, a deeply personal, human document of terror. They force us to reconsider the narrative. Instead of asking, "Did it happen?" the tapes lead us to ask, "What did this family experience?" Regardless of whether the force was supernatural or psychological, the fear was real. The trauma was real. The Lutz family's life was turned upside down, not just by their 28 days in that house, but by the decades of scrutiny, ridicule, and debate that followed. The Lutz Family Files peels back the layers of Hollywood sensationalism and public skepticism to reveal the human heart of the story. It's the sound of a family's American dream turning into an American nightmare, captured one cassette tape at a time. It reminds us that before it was a franchise, before it was a horror trope, Amityville was the story of a family who believed they were living through hell on Earth and recorded it for posterity. What do you think? Do these tapes change your perspective on the Amityville case? Do they lend credibility to the Lutz's story, or simply add another layer to a complex psychological drama? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's most fascinating mysteries. If you enjoy exploring the hidden stories behind famous events, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one. Have you ever felt a chill run down your spine in a place that should feel safe? Imagine moving your family into what you think is your dream home, a peaceful farmhouse in the heartland of America, only to find it's a gateway to something else. This isn't just a ghost story. This is the terrifying true account of the Nebraska entity and the farmhouse of souls. Our story begins in a quiet, unassuming corner of Nebraska. A young family, full of hope, purchases an old farmhouse, ready to build a new life. The house was charming, rustic, and seemed perfect. But perfection is often just a mask. It started subtly, as these things often do. A feeling of being watched, objects moving on their own, the sound of soft whispers carried on the wind when no one was there. At first, they dismissed it. Old houses creak, the wind plays tricks. It had to be their imagination, right? But soon, the subtle signs became impossible to ignore. The whispers grew louder, clearer, seeming to emanate from beneath the floorboards themselves. They were sinister, guttural sounds, speaking in a language no one could understand. Yet the malevolent intent was crystal clear. Then came the physical evidence. One morning, the family awoke to find deep, vicious claw marks gouged into the wooden doors and walls, as if a large, unseen animal had tried to break in, or out. The fear in the house thickened, becoming a palpable presence. It wasn't just sounds and scratches anymore. It felt like the house itself was alive and hated them. The children began having night terrors, waking up screaming about a shadow man, with glowing red eyes standing in the corner of their rooms. The parents would see fleeting shapes in their peripheral vision, dark masses that would vanish the moment they turned to look. The air grew heavy, oppressive, and a constant bone-chilling cold settled in certain rooms, a cold that no furnace could warm. Then came the most terrifying discovery of all. In the dusty, forgotten corners of the attic and the dark, damp cellar, they found them. Small, crudely burned crosses etched into the wooden beams and stone foundations. Who had put them there? Were they a warning? Or were they a desperate attempt to contain something evil, an attempt that had clearly failed? The family realized they weren't just dealing with a simple haunting. This was something ancient, something malevolent. This entity wasn't just a ghost of a person, it was something that had never been human. The activity escalated with horrifying speed. Doors would slam shut with violent force, locking them in rooms. The whispers turned to growls and blood-curdling screams that echoed from the walls. Objects would fly across the room aimed directly at family members. The entity was no longer just trying to scare them, it was trying to harm them. The breaking point came one night when the father was thrown down the basement stairs by an unseen force. Battered, bruised, and utterly terrified, they knew they couldn't stay another second. They grabbed what they could, piled into their car, and fled into the night, leaving behind their dream home, which had become their worst nightmare. They never looked back, but their story spread, whispered in hushed tones throughout the local community and eventually reaching the ears of paranormal investigators. Intrigued and armed with state-of-the-art equipment, a team decided to brave the abandoned farmhouse to see if they could document the entity that had driven a family from their home. They were about to find out that the house had been waiting for new visitors. As the investigators crossed the threshold, the silence was deafening. The air was thick, heavy, and smelled of decay and something else. Something like burnt ozone. The claw marks were still there, a stark reminder of the violence that had occurred. The house was eerily still, as if holding its breath. The team set up their gear: EMF meters, EVP recorders, thermal cameras, all designed to capture proof of the paranormal. They began their investigation, calling out into the darkness, asking if anything was there. For hours, there was nothing but silence. Just as they began to think the stories were exaggerated, it started. An EMF meter, sitting untouched on a table, suddenly spiked, its lights flashing wildly as it screamed an electronic wail. At the same time, an investigator's camera battery, which had been fully charged, was instantly drained to zero. The cold spots returned, plunging the temperature in the room by over 30 degrees in a matter of seconds. On the thermal camera, a human-shaped cold mass began to form in the corner of the room where the children had seen the shadow man. Then, the whispers began. The EVP recorders picked up the same guttural, inhuman language the family had described. But this time, among the terrifying whispers, a single, clear word in English was recorded. It was a chilling, direct threat. Get out. The team, though shaken, pressed on. They moved to the basement, the site of the father's attack. As they descended the stairs, a loud, guttural growl erupted from the darkness below, so powerful it vibrated through the floorboards. One of the investigators, a seasoned professional, was so overcome with a feeling of pure dread and nausea that he had to retreat outside. The team that remained captured what many believed to be some of the most compelling paranormal evidence ever recorded. They filmed a heavy wooden crate sliding across the concrete floor on its own. They recorded disembodied screams and the sound of something large and heavy pacing back and forth in the locked attic above them. The Farmhouse of Souls, as it came to be known, was not just haunted, it was occupied by an intelligent, powerful, and deeply malevolent entity. The investigators, having documented more than they ever bargained for, wisely decided to heed the warning they had been given. They packed up their gear and left, leaving the house once again to its dark inhabitant. To this day, the farmhouse stands abandoned in the Nebraska countryside, a silent monument to the terror it holds. Locals stay far away, and the story of the Nebraska entity serves as a chilling reminder that some places are better left alone, and that there are things in the shadows that science and reason cannot explain. What do you think dwells within those walls? A demon? An ancient elemental? We may never know for sure. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the dark. If you enjoy exploring the unexplained, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more terrifying true stories. Stay safe, and always check what might be hiding under your own floorboards. Have you ever heard a house cry? Not the creaks and groans of settling wood, but actual, heart-wrenching sobs echoing through the halls? What if those cries were accompanied by something even more terrifying? Blood seeping from the very walls. Today, we're journeying to Niagara Falls, not for the breathtaking views, but to uncover the chilling tale of the Weeping House. This isn't just another ghost story. It's a documented account that has baffled and terrified people for over a century. The story begins in the late 19th century. Nestled near the Thundering Falls stood an elegant mansion, home to a prosperous family. From the outside, it was the picture of Victorian success, but inside, a sinister secret was beginning to manifest. It started subtly, strange damp patches appearing on the wallpaper. The family initially dismissed it as simple humidity, a common issue so close to the Niagara River. But these patches weren't just water. They had a faint reddish tint and a coppery smell that was impossible to ignore. Soon, the patches darkened, turning a deep, disturbing crimson. They would appear overnight, as if the house itself had been wounded in the dead of night. The family would scrub them away, only for them to reappear in the same spot, sometimes even larger than before. Panic began to set in. This was no ordinary leak. It felt alive. The family started hearing things too. Faint whimpers like a child in distress seemed to emanate from the very walls where the stains appeared. Desperate and terrified, the family turned to the one place they thought could help: the church. They believed a malevolent force had taken root in their home and that only divine intervention could save them. 2 priests were dispatched to the mansion, armed with holy water, crosses, and their unwavering faith. They were skeptical, of course, accustomed to tales born of overactive imaginations, but what they witnessed would shake them to their core. Upon entering the house, the priests immediately felt an oppressive cold, a stark contrast to the warm day outside. The family led them to the most affected room, where the crimson stains were most prominent. As the priests began their prayers, something extraordinary happened. The faint whimpers the family had described grew louder, transforming into distinct, sorrowful sobs that seemed to come from all around them. The air grew heavy, thick with an almost tangible grief. Then, before their very eyes, fresh trickles of red began to ooze from the wallpaper. It wasn't a gush, but a slow, deliberate seep, like tears of blood tracing paths down the wall. The priests, stunned but resolute, intensified their prayers. They sprinkled holy water on the walls, their Latin incantations echoing through the room. But their efforts had the opposite effect. The louder they prayed, the louder the cries became, escalating into agonizing screams of pain and despair. The bleeding intensified, the stains spreading like a horrific bloom. It was as if their prayers were not banishing the entity, but tormenting it, causing it to lash out in a display of its suffering. The priests documented everything they saw and heard. Their official reports described manifestations of a profound and sorrowful nature and a viscous, reddish substance, consistent in appearance with blood, emanating directly from the walls. They noted the direct correlation. The more they attempted to cleanse the house, the more violently it reacted. They had never encountered anything like it. It wasn't a typical haunting, filled with anger or aggression. This felt different. It felt like an eternal, inconsolable sadness that had soaked into the very foundation of the home. The priests conducted multiple visits, each one yielding the same terrifying results. They couldn't explain the phenomenon. Was it the tormented spirit of someone who had suffered a terrible fate within those walls? Some local legends began to circulate. One story spoke of a young woman who had lived in the house decades earlier, forced into a loveless marriage. She was said to have wasted away from a broken heart, her silent tears eventually turning to blood in her final agonizing days. Another tale whispered of a terrible accident, a child lost, whose parents' grief was so powerful it became a permanent scar on the property. Whatever the source, the entity seemed trapped in a loop of its own misery, and the presence of religious rites only amplified its agony. The family, unable to endure the constant sorrow and horror, eventually abandoned the mansion. They left everything behind, fleeing the house that wept blood. For years, the Weeping House of Niagara stood empty, a monument to an unexplained tragedy. Locals would dare each other to approach it at night, claiming you could still hear the faint cries on the wind and see the dark stains through the grime-covered windows. Over time, the mansion fell into disrepair. The story, once a documented and terrifying reality, slowly faded into the realm of local folklore. The house itself was eventually torn down, erased from the landscape to make way for new developments. No physical trace of the Weeping House remains today. There are no plaques, no memorials, just the thundering, constant roar of Niagara Falls, a sound that perhaps long ago masked the sounds of a house in tears. But the records remain. The priests' accounts, tucked away in church archives, serve as a chilling testament to what they witnessed. The Weeping House of Niagara isn't just a ghost story to tell around a campfire. It's a documented paranormal event that defies easy explanation. It forces us to ask, can a place absorb human emotion? Can grief become so powerful that it manifests physically, causing a house to literally bleed its sorrow for all to see? The science of the time had no answers, and even today, the story sits in that unsettling space between the known and the unknowable. What do you think happened in that house? Was it a heartbroken spirit, a geological anomaly with a spooky coincidence, or something else entirely? Let me know your theories down in the comments. It's a story that truly sticks with you. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the strange and unexplained. If you enjoyed this dive into history's darker corners, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more tales that blur the line between reality and legend. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next video. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're journeying deep into the heart of Louisiana, to a place where Spanish moss hangs like ancient secrets from towering oak trees, and the air itself feels heavy with history. We're going to the Myrtles Plantation, often called one of America's most haunted homes. But we're not just here for a general ghost tour. We're zeroing in on one specific object, an artifact so chilling, it's said to hold the very souls of the dead captive within its silvery depths. We're talking about the haunted mirror of the Myrtles Plantation. The story of the Myrtles begins long before any ghosts were reported. Built in 1796 by General David Bradford, this sprawling antebellum home has seen more than its fair share of life and, as legend has it, death. Over the centuries, the plantation passed through several hands, and with each new owner, new layers were added to its complex and often tragic history. The idyllic beauty of the estate, with its grand architecture and lush gardens, stands in stark contrast to the dark tales that have seeped into its very foundations. While stories of at least 12 different spirits roaming the property are common, the most famous and unsettling tales all seem to converge on one single, ornate object hanging in the grand foyer. Let's set the scene. Imagine walking into the main entryway of this historic home. Your eyes are immediately drawn to a large gilded mirror. It's beautiful, an antique piece that reflects the grand staircase and the hallway beyond. But as you look closer, you might notice something off. The glass seems cloudy, marred by strange, persistent smudges that look almost like handprints. Specifically, the handprints of a small child. Now, you might think it's just dust or a poorly cleaned surface. But here's the chilling part. The staff at the Myrtles Plantation say they clean this mirror constantly. Yet, no matter how many times they wipe it down, the smudges always return, sometimes within minutes. And that's not all. Visitors and employees alike have reported seeing strange figures appearing in the reflection, figures that are not actually standing in the room. So, where did this legend come from? The most prominent story tied to the mirror involves Sarah Woodruff and her two children. Sarah was the wife of Clark Woodruff, who inherited the plantation in the 1820s. The tale goes that Sarah and her children were tragically poisoned. As was the custom at the time, mirrors in the house were covered with cloth after a death to prevent the spirits of the deceased from getting trapped inside. It's a very old superstition, the idea that a mirror can act as a portal or a prison for a soul that hasn't yet crossed over. Legend says that this one particular mirror was overlooked. It was never covered, and so it is believed that the spirits of Sarah and her children were captured in the glass, unable to leave. Now, who was responsible for this terrible act? The most famous version of the story points a finger at a woman named Chloe. According to the legend, Chloe was an enslaved person on the plantation who was punished for eavesdropping on the family's private conversations. As the story goes, she baked a cake containing poisonous oleander leaves. Her intention was supposedly only to make the family sick so she could nurse them back to health and regain favor. However, the plan went horribly wrong, and Sarah and her two daughters, not Clark, ate the cake and died. Overcome with guilt and fear, Chloe supposedly confessed to other enslaved people, who then took matters into their own hands to prevent the wrath of the owner from falling on all of them. This story of Chloe is perhaps the most famous one associated with the Myrtles, often depicted with a green turban to hide her punishment. She is said to be one of the most active spirits on the property. However, it's crucial to note that historical records are murky at best. There is no definitive proof that a person named Chloe ever lived at the Myrtles, or that the Woodruffs died from poisoning. Historical documents actually show that Sarah Woodruff and only one of her children died, and they died from yellow fever, a common and devastating illness at the time. This is a powerful reminder of how legends can grow and change over time, sometimes overshadowing the real, documented history of a place. The real tragedy of yellow fever gets replaced by a more dramatic, more sensational tale of betrayal and poison. But whether the story of Chloe is fact or folklore, the experiences people have with the mirror remain undeniably consistent and deeply unsettling. Let's talk about what people actually see and experience. Beyond the inexplicable handprints, guests have captured some truly eerie photographs of the mirror. In the reflection, faint, shadowy figures have appeared. Some look like children, while others are more distorted, almost like spectral faces peering out from within the glass. People standing near the mirror have reported feeling sudden cold spots, a common sign of paranormal activity. Others have felt a strange, unnerving sensation of being watched, only to turn and find no one there. Some have even claimed to see the figures in the mirror move, their reflected eyes seeming to follow them as they walk through the foyer. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence, if you can call it that, comes from the sheer volume of these reports. We're not talking about one or two isolated incidents. We're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of separate accounts from different people over many decades. Tour guides, overnight guests, paranormal investigators, and casual visitors have all shared similar stories. They describe the small handprints, the shadowy figures, the feeling of a presence emanating from the mirror itself. The consistency is what makes the legend so powerful and enduring. When so many people who have never met each other describe the exact same strange phenomena, it becomes harder and harder to dismiss it all as mere imagination or a trick of the light. Paranormal teams have flocked to the Myrtles, bringing with them all sorts of high-tech gear. They've used EMF meters which have allegedly spiked wildly near the mirror. They've used thermal cameras, which have picked up unexplainable cold spots on the mirror's surface that match the shape of a hand. And, of course, they've used audio recorders to try and capture electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs. Some investigators claim to have recorded faint whispers near the mirror, including what sounds like a child's cry or a woman softly calling a name. While none of this is definitive scientific proof, it adds yet another layer to the mystery. It feeds the narrative that something is truly happening here, something that our current understanding of the world can't quite explain. So, what are we to make of all this? Is the mirror at the Myrtles plantation a genuine paranormal artifact, a gateway or a prison for lost souls? Or is it simply a case of mass suggestion, fueled by a compelling backstory and the spooky atmosphere of an old Southern home? The human mind is incredibly powerful. If you go to a place expecting to see a ghost, your brain can sometimes play tricks on you, interpreting shadows and reflections as something more. The power of suggestion, especially when told a story as tragic and detailed as that of Sarah, her children, and Chloe, is immense. It primes you to experience something supernatural. But even with a skeptical mind, it's hard to explain away everything. The handprints that reappear after being cleaned. The photographic evidence captured by countless individuals. The sheer number of consistent personal experiences. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Perhaps the mirror isn't a literal prison, but a kind of psychic amplifier. Maybe the immense tragedy and emotional energy of the plantation's history have somehow been imprinted onto this object, allowing it to replay moments from the past or reflect the psychic energy of those who look into it. It's a fascinating thought. Whether you're a staunch believer in the paranormal or a dedicated skeptic, the story of the Myrtles plantation mirror is undeniably captivating. It touches on our deepest fears and curiosities about life, death, and what might lie beyond. It's a reminder that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, but rather to be experienced and pondered. The mirror stands as a silent witness to history, its clouded surface reflecting not just the faces of the living, but perhaps, just perhaps, the lingering echoes of the souls who came before. What do you think? Have you ever visited the Myrtles? Or have you had a similar experience with an object that seemed to hold a life of its own? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey into one of America's greatest hauntings. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more explorations into the world's most mysterious places. Ring that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay curious. Have you ever wondered if it's possible for a soul to return to the world in another's body? It sounds like something out of a movie, but what if I told you this might have actually happened in a small town in Illinois back in the 19th century? This is the story of the Watseka Wonder, a case that baffled doctors, stunned families, and remains one of the most compelling paranormal accounts in American history. It all began in 1877 with a 13-year-old girl named Laurency Venom. Laurency was a sweet, normal girl until she started experiencing strange and terrifying seizures. During these episodes, she would fall into a trance-like state, sometimes for hours, even days. When she awoke, she wasn't herself. She would speak in different voices, claiming to be various spirits, from an old woman named Katrina Hogan to a young man named Willie Canning. Her parents were desperate. They took her to numerous doctors and asylum superintendents, but no one could diagnose her condition. They feared she was losing her mind and that she would have to be committed to an asylum for the insane. The medical community was at a loss. Was it epilepsy? Hysteria? No explanation seemed to fit the bizarre symptoms Laurency was exhibiting. The family was running out of hope, facing the heartbreaking possibility of losing their daughter to an institution. Just when all seemed lost, a man named Asa B. Roth entered their lives. Mr. Roth was a devout spiritualist from the nearby town of Watseka. He had heard about Laurency's strange condition, and it resonated deeply with him because he had experienced a similar tragedy in his own family. Years earlier, his own daughter, Mary Roth, had suffered from similar fits and mental disturbances. Mary had claimed her body was being controlled by other spirits, and, tragically, she had passed away in an asylum at the young age of 19 in 1865. Mr. Roth believed that Laurency wasn't sick in the medical sense. He proposed a different theory, that she was a medium, and her body was being used as a vessel for spirits. He suggested that instead of fighting these spirits, they should try to communicate with them and invite a more gentle, benevolent spirit to take control, one that could help Laurency. He suggested that perhaps the spirit of his own deceased daughter, Mary Roth, could help. Desperate for any solution that didn't involve an asylum, the Venom family agreed to let Mr. Roth try his spiritualist approach. He brought in a local physician and spiritualist, Dr. E. Winchester Stevens, to oversee the process. Dr. Stevens placed Laurency into a hypnotic state. During the trance, Laurency's personality seemed to shift. The troubled spirits left, and a new, calmer presence announced itself. When asked who she was, the voice coming from Laurency's lips calmly stated, "I am Mary Roth." The change was instantaneous and astonishing. The girl who woke up was no longer Laurency Venom. She didn't recognize her own parents or siblings. She looked around the Venom house with confusion, asking where her real family was. She called for her Pa and Ma Roth and her siblings, referring to them by their correct names. She was distressed and confused, insisting that she was in the wrong house and with the wrong family. To test this incredible claim, the Roth family was brought in. The moment Mary saw Mr. and Mrs. Roth, she rushed to them, embracing them as if she hadn't seen them in years. She called them Pa and Ma, and correctly identified all her brothers and sisters by their nicknames, even those she had never met, like a sister who was born after the real Mary had died. She seemed completely at home with the Roths, while the Venoms were now strangers to her. Convinced that this was indeed the spirit of their deceased daughter, the Roths asked the Venoms if Mary could come live with them. In an incredible act of faith and desperation, the Venoms agreed. And so, Laurency Venom moved into the Roth household, living as Mary Roth. What happened next is what makes this story so unbelievable. Mary immediately settled into the Roth family home as if she had never left. She walked through the house, pointing out changes that had been made since her death 12 years prior. She'd say things like, "That door wasn't there when I lived here," or, We used to have a different table in this room. She knew the location of her personal belongings, items that had been packed away for over a decade. She once asked her mother about a velvet dress she used to own. Mrs. Roff had given it away, but she found a small scrap of the fabric, and Mary identified it immediately. She recognized old friends and neighbors of the Roff family by name, sharing memories and inside jokes that only the real Mary could have known. She recalled specific childhood events, conversations, and even secrets. She remembered a pinprick scar on her father's neck from a childhood accident, and knew about a time her sister had almost cut her hand with a knife. These were intimate family details that a stranger like Lurency Venom could have no possible way of knowing. For about 14 weeks, Lurency lived as Mary Roff. She was happy, healthy, and showed no signs of the previous mental distress. Dr. Stevens documented everything, interviewing dozens of witnesses from the town of Watseka. Friends, neighbors, and skeptics all came to see the Watseka wonder, and most left convinced that they had truly witnessed the return of Mary Roff. Then, one day, Mary announced that her time was coming to an end. She explained to the Roff family that she had to leave to make way for Lurency's return. She told them that Lurency's own spirit had been in heaven, healing and growing stronger, and was now ready to come back to her own body. The farewell was emotional. Mary said her goodbyes to the Roff family, promising she would always watch over them. She then fell into a deep sleep. When she awoke a short time later, she was Lurency Venom again. She was back in the Roff house, confused about where she was and how she got there. Her memory of the past few months was gone. Mrs. Roff gently escorted her back to the Venom home, where she was joyfully reunited with her biological family. Amazingly, Lurency never suffered from the seizures or trances again. She grew up to be a perfectly healthy woman, got married, and had children. But the connection to Mary Roff never completely disappeared. Occasionally, Mary's spirit would briefly return to speak through Lurency, usually to offer comfort or guidance to the Roff family. The two families remained close for the rest of their lives, forever bonded by this extraordinary experience. So, what really happened in Watseka? Was it a genuine case of spirit possession and reincarnation, a temporary walk-in soul, as some have called it, or was it an elaborate hoax? If it was a hoax, how did a 13-year-old girl with no formal education pull it off? How did she know such intimate details of a family she'd never met and a girl who died before she was even born? Skeptics have argued it could have been a case of split personality, or that Lurency somehow learned all this information beforehand. But remember, this was 1878. There was no internet, no easy way to research a family's history in another town, and dozens of credible, upstanding citizens swore to the truth of what they saw. The case of the Watseka Wonder remains a powerful, perplexing, and deeply moving story that challenges our understanding of life, death, and consciousness itself. What do you think? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Was Lurency Venom truly possessed by the spirit of Mary Roff? Thanks so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations into the world's greatest mysteries. See you next time. Eerie, atmospheric intro music begins and fades into the background. They called it The Rock, an island fortress rising from the cold, choppy waters of San Francisco Bay. Alcatraz. For 29 years, it was America's most notorious federal penitentiary, designed to be inescapable. It housed the nation's most dangerous criminals, men like Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, and the Birdman of Alcatraz, Robert Stroud. In 1963, the prison officially closed its doors, citing high operational costs. The last inmates were transferred, the cells were emptied, and an era came to an end. Or did it? While the living prisoners left, many believe that some spirits never did. Today, Alcatraz is a national park, visited by over 1 million tourists each year. But for the park rangers, maintenance workers, and countless visitors who have walked its lonely corridors, It's something more. It's considered one of the most haunted places in America. They say that when the last ferry leaves for the night and the fog rolls in, the island truly comes alive. The question isn't whether Alcatraz is haunted, but by whom. Let's start in the main cell house, specifically D Block. This was the isolation wing, known as the Hole. Inmates were sent here for disciplinary infractions. It was a place of sensory deprivation, cold, dark, and utterly silent. Cells 9 through 14 were the solitary confinement cells, but it's cell 14D that holds the darkest story. In the 1940s, an inmate was thrown into 14D. Almost immediately, he began screaming that a creature with glowing eyes was in the cell with him, trying to kill him. The guards, used to inmates trying to game the system, ignored his cries. The screaming continued for hours, then abruptly stopped. The next morning, they found the inmate dead. The autopsy revealed he had been strangled, but the marks on his neck didn't match his own hands or anyone else's. To this day, visitors and staff report an intense, bone-chilling cold spot right inside cell 14D, even on the warmest days. Some have felt a strange energy, a sense of being watched, and an overwhelming feeling of dread that forces them to leave immediately. Then there's the infamous Battle of Alcatraz. In May of 1946, 6 inmates attempted a violent and desperate escape. They managed to overpower guards and seize weapons, leading to a bloody 2-day standoff. By the time it was over, 2 guards and 3 of the inmates were dead. The utility corridor where much of the battle took place, nicknamed Broadway by the guards, is now a hotspot for paranormal activity. Staff members have reported hearing the unmistakable sounds of gunfire and running footsteps echoing through the corridor late at night. The metallic clang of a cell door slamming shut is another common report, even though all the doors are now permanently open or securely locked. It S, as if the desperate energy of that battle is forever imprinted on the very walls of the prison. Perhaps one of the most well-known ghostly residents is the spirit often associated with Al Capone. While Capone was never a model prisoner, he feared the solitary D Block more than anything. Instead, he found a way to get himself assigned to the hospital wing. But what truly unnerved him was his time in the shower room. Capone, who had learned to play the banjo in the prison band, would often practice there to avoid being bothered. He repeatedly told other inmates and guards that he was being haunted in that shower room by the ghost of James Jimmy Clark, one of the men he had ordered killed in the St. Valentine's Day massacre. He claimed the ghost would torment him, whispering and appearing when he was alone. After Capone's transfer, the strange banjo music didn't stop. For years, park rangers and even visitors have reported hearing the faint, phantom strumming of a banjo coming from the empty shower room. When they go to investigate, the music stops, and there's no one there. And it's not just the cell blocks. The warden's house, now just a burned-out shell, is another active area. During a party held there for park staff years ago, multiple witnesses reported seeing a shadowy figure in a dark suit and hat appear amidst the festivities. They heard disembodied voices and the clinking of glasses, as if a spectral party from the past was unfolding right alongside their own. The figure is believed to be the spirit of Warden James A. Johnston, the first and longest-serving warden of Alcatraz, still watching over his island. Even the most mundane locations on the island seem to hold echoes of the past. In the prison laundry room, workers have reported the strong, unexplained smell of smoke, as if from a cigar, often attributed to the ghost of a guard who patrolled that area. Others have heard soft crying and moaning coming from the corners of the room where inmates toiled for hours. The prison hospital is another chilling location. Visitors have felt sudden drops in temperature and heard the sounds of medical equipment rolling on the floor, despite the room being completely empty. Some psychics and sensitives who have visited the island claim the hospital is a vortex of residual energy, holding on to the pain and suffering of the sick and mentally disturbed inmates who were treated there. Perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the people who work there every day. Many park rangers, initially skeptics, have their own stories to tell after spending enough time on the island after dark. One longtime ranger spoke of closing up the cell house late one night. He was completely alone. As he walked down the main corridor, he heard a distinct, mournful wail coming from one of the upper tiers. Knowing he was the only living person inside, he called out, but the sound only repeated, echoing in the vast, empty space. Another staff member was locking up the administration building when he heard what sounded like a woman sobbing. He searched the entire building but found no one. He later learned that guards' families had lived in apartments within that building, and their lives were often filled with stress and sadness. So, what is it about Alcatraz that makes it such a paranormal magnet? Is it the sheer concentration of misery, desperation, and violence that soaked into the stone and steel for 3 decades? Is it the isolation of the island itself, surrounded by treacherous currents that made both physical and spiritual escape seem impossible? Or are these simply the stories we tell ourselves, the creaks and groans of an old, decaying building amplified by its chilling history? Whatever the explanation, the stories persist. The disembodied voices, the phantom footsteps, the spectral banjo music, and the slamming cell doors continue to be reported by credible witnesses. It seems that while the U.S. government declared Alcatraz closed in 1963, some of its most famous residents never got the memo. They remain trapped on the Rock, serving a sentence that extends far beyond a lifetime. Alcatraz isn't just a museum, it's a prison that, for some, never truly closed. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the haunted history of Alcatraz. If you've ever visited and had your own strange experience, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more explorations into the world's most mysterious places. Until next time, stay curious. Video opens with atmospheric shots of Edinburgh's old town streets at twilight, then transitions to a dimly lit, stone-walled tunnel. Hello, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're journeying deep beneath the bustling streets of one of Europe's most beautiful cities, Edinburgh. But we're not here for the majestic castle or the historic Royal Mile. We're going underground, into a place where history is not just remembered, it's felt. A place where shadows dance in the candlelight and the whispers of the past still echo in the stone. This is the story of the Edinburgh Vaults. To understand the vaults, we have to rewind to the late 18th century. Edinburgh was a city bursting at the seams, a hub of the Scottish Enlightenment. Commerce was booming, but space was running out. The solution? Build bridges to connect the old town's high ridge to the surrounding hills. In 1788, the South Bridge was completed. It was an architectural marvel, with 19 arches designed to span the Cowgate Valley. But instead of leaving these arches open, the city's leaders saw an opportunity. They sealed them, creating a series of underground chambers or vaults directly beneath the bridge. Initially, the vaults were a hive of activity. They were used by the businesses on the bridge above as workshops and storage spaces. We're talking about taverns, cobblers, smelters, and all sorts of tradesmen. Imagine the noise, the heat, the constant hustle and bustle, all happening right under the feet of the city's residents. These weren't dark, scary places at first. They were an integral part of Edinburgh's commercial life. Evidence of this era is still visible today. You can see where blacksmiths' fires blackened the stone ceilings and where wine merchants stored their barrels. For about 30 years, this underground world thrived, but the design had a fatal flaw. The bridge was built hastily, and it wasn't properly waterproofed. Water from the streets above began to seep through the stone, creating relentlessly damp, dark, and unsanitary conditions. Legitimate businesses couldn't operate in such an environment. One by one, they packed up and left, abandoning the vaults. And as the respectable world moved out, a much darker world moved in. The mid-1800s saw the vaults descend into a notorious slum. They became the home of the city's most destitute and desperate souls. Entire families crammed into single, windowless, and perpetually cold chambers. Without sanitation or running water, disease ran rampant. This underground labyrinth became a haven for illicit activities. Illegal distilleries operated in the darkness, hidden taverns served patrons away from the law's gaze, and it's widely believed that some of the city's most infamous characters used these tunnels for their grim business. I'm talking, of course, about the infamous body snatchers, Burke and Hare. In the 1820s, Edinburgh was a leading center for anatomical study, but there was a severe shortage of legally available cadavers for medical students. This created a gruesome black market. Burke and Hare found a brutally simple way to meet this demand. They murdered at least 16 people and sold their bodies to the anatomy school. While there's no concrete proof they used the vaults to store their victims before sale, the timeline fits perfectly. The hidden, lawless nature of the vaults would have made them the ideal chilling location for such a dreadful enterprise. Just imagine. The very walls around us might have witnessed these unspeakable acts. As conditions worsened and the city's poverty was pushed out of sight and out of mind, the vaults were eventually filled in with rubble and forgotten. For over a century, they lay dormant, sealed off from the world above. Their existence faded from public memory, becoming little more than a local legend. It wasn't until the 1980s that they were rediscovered by accident. A former rugby player, Norrie Rowan, gained access to a manhole and, with his son, excavated a tunnel filled with debris. What they found was astonishing. A perfectly preserved yet utterly terrifying time capsule of 18th and 19th century Edinburgh. And that's when things started to get strange. As the vaults were cleared and opened for tours, visitors and guides began reporting unexplainable phenomena. The stories aren't just one-offs, they are numerous, consistent, and deeply unsettling. People speak of sudden, dramatic drops in temperature, the feeling of unseen hands touching their hair or tugging at their clothes, and the disembodied sounds of children crying or men shouting in rooms that are completely empty. One of the most famous resident spirits is known simply as the Cobbler. He's said to inhabit a vault that was once a shoemaker's workshop. Visitors often report the smell of old leather and the distinct sound of hammering, as if he's still mending shoes at his bench. He's described as a grumpy spirit, seemingly annoyed by the constant intrusion into his workspace. People have reported feeling a sense of being watched or even pushed when they linger too long in his chamber. Then there is the entity known as Mr. Boots. His presence is announced by the sound of heavy, stomping footsteps echoing through the stone corridors. No one knows who he was in life, but his spectral patrol is one of the most frequently reported auditory experiences in the vaults. Guides have been leading tours, only to stop and listen as the heavy steps approach them from an empty tunnel, fading as they seem to pass right through the group. Perhaps the most malevolent and well-documented spirit is the Watcher, or sometimes called the South Bridge entity. This presence is felt in a specific vault and is known for its more aggressive interactions. It's not a playful spirit. People have reported being scratched, having stones thrown at them from dark corners, and experiencing an overwhelming feeling of dread and malice. In the 1990s, a television crew attempted to hold a séance in this very room. The psychic involved was reportedly so overwhelmed by the negative energy that she fled in terror, refusing to ever return. This single chamber is often the focus of paranormal investigations, and even the most hardened skeptics have admitted to feeling an oppressive, hostile energy within its walls. And we can't forget the children. Many of the vaults were used as living quarters for impoverished families, and child mortality was tragically high. Visitors often report hearing the faint sounds of children laughing or crying. One of the most touching stories is that of Jack, a little boy spirit who is said to grab the hands of visitors. Some paranormal groups have even left toys for him in one of the chambers, and tour guides have reported finding them moved to different locations overnight. It's a sad reminder of the real human tragedy that unfolded in these dark spaces. So, what is happening down here? Are these the echoes of intense human suffering imprinted on the very stone of the vaults? Are they the restless souls of plague victims, as some legends suggest, or the spirits of those who lived and died in squalor and desperation? Skeptics would point to logical explanations: the natural acoustics of the tunnels, temperature fluctuations caused by drafts, and the power of suggestion in a creepy environment. And they have a point. The mind is a powerful thing, and when you're told you're in a haunted place, you start looking for ghosts. But the sheer volume and consistency of the reports from the Edinburgh vaults are hard to dismiss entirely. Thousands of people from all walks of life have shared similar experiences over decades. Paranormal investigators using EMF meters, thermal cameras, and audio recorders have captured compelling, though not definitive, evidence. They've recorded disembodied voices on EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, that seem to answer direct questions, and have captured strange light anomalies and inexplicable shadows on camera. Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, there is no denying the profound atmosphere of the Edinburgh vaults. Walking through these candlelit chambers is like stepping back in time. You can feel the weight of history, the desperation, the struggle, and the resilience of the people who once called this place home. The cold stone, the endless damp, the oppressive darkness, it ews an environment that connects you directly to the city's grim and forgotten past. It's a stark reminder that beneath the polished surface of a modern city lies a foundation built on stories of hardship and survival. The vaults are more than just a ghost tour attraction. They are a vital, visceral piece of Scottish history. They tell a story not of kings and queens, but of the ordinary, forgotten people who lived and died in the shadows. So, if you ever find yourself in Edinburgh, I highly recommend you take a tour. But be prepared. Keep your senses open, and don't be surprised if you feel a cold breath on your neck or a gentle tug on your sleeve. It might just be one of the lost souls of the vaults, reaching out from the darkness to let you know they are still here. Thanks for joining us on this journey beneath the city. What do you think is going on in the vaults? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this exploration of the unknown, please hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures into the world's most mysterious places. Until next time, stay curious. In 2005, the world was captivated and horrified by a film called The Exorcism of Emily Rose. It told the story of a young woman possessed, a priest on trial, and a battle between faith and science. But what many people don't know is that the film was just a whisper of the truth. Behind the Hollywood production lies a real, documented case that is far more disturbing than anything you've seen on screen. This is the story of Anneliese Michel, a young German woman whose terrifying ordeal left a permanent scar on history. The evidence from her final months, including audio recordings, still sends shivers down the spines of those who dare to listen. Was she a victim of severe mental illness, or was she truly fighting a war against ancient demonic forces? Join us as we uncover the haunting truth. Anneliese Michel was born in 1952 in Liebelfing, a small, devoutly Catholic town in Bavaria, Germany. By all accounts, she was a bright, happy, and deeply religious young girl. She was raised in a strict Catholic family where faith was the cornerstone of their existence. Her life was normal, filled with school, friends, and prayer until 1968. At just 16 years old, something changed. Anneliese experienced her first major convulsion. Her body shook uncontrollably, and she lost consciousness. A year passed, and she suffered another similar episode. This time, her parents, Joseph and Anna, took her to a doctor. A neurological examination revealed nothing abnormal, but a later EEG test showed some brain irregularities, leading to a diagnosis of temporal lobe epilepsy. She was prescribed medication to control the seizures, and for a while it seemed to be working. Anneliese finished high school and in 1973 enrolled at the University of Würzburg to become a teacher. She was intelligent and ambitious, but a dark cloud was gathering over her. Despite the medication, her condition worsened. She began experiencing terrifying visual and auditory hallucinations while praying. She claimed to see demonic faces, what she called fratsen, and hear voices telling her she was damned and would rot in hell. Her depression deepened, and she started to develop a severe aversion to religious objects. The sight of a crucifix, holy water, or a church would send her into a state of panic and rage. She once refused to walk past a chapel, claiming the ground burned her feet. The medical treatments were failing. Annalisa's behavior became increasingly erratic and disturbing. She would eat spiders and coal, drink her own urine, and bark like a dog for days on end. She would perform hundreds of squats a day to the point of rupturing her knee ligaments. At night, her family would be woken by horrific screams and growls coming from her room. They watched in horror as the daughter they knew disappeared, replaced by something full of hatred and violence. Annalisa herself was tormented. In her moments of lucidity, she was desperate for help, convinced that a demon was possessing her and that medicine was powerless against it. The family, deeply rooted in their faith, started to believe her. They saw her suffering not as a medical problem, but as a spiritual one. Convinced that their daughter was possessed, the Michel family sought help from the church. Initially, their requests for an exorcism were repeatedly denied. The church officials urged them to continue with medical treatment, as the criteria for demonic possession are extremely strict. However, Annalisa's condition continued to deteriorate. She grew increasingly violent towards herself and her family. Desperate, the family found a priest, Father Ernst Alt, who took their claims seriously. After observing Annalisa and her extreme aversion to religious symbols, he became convinced she was genuinely possessed. He petitioned the Bishop of Würzburg, Josef Stangl, for permission to perform the rite of exorcism. In September 1975, after years of pleading, Bishop Stangl finally granted permission, but he ordered it to be performed in total secrecy. Father Alt was joined by another priest, Father Arnold Renz, a seasoned exorcist. From September 1975 to July 1976, they conducted a staggering 67 exorcism sessions, sometimes 1 or 2 per week, each lasting up to 4 hours. During these rites, Annalisa's voice would change dramatically. She would speak in deep, guttural tones, using languages she had never learned. The priests recorded over 40 hours of these sessions on cassette tapes, hoping to document the process and prove the reality of the possession. These recordings are bone-chilling. On them, you can hear what sounds like multiple entities arguing with each other from within Annalisa. They identified themselves with names like Lucifer, Cain, Judas Iscariot, Nero, and even Adolf Hitler. They would mock the priests, blaspheme, and describe hell in graphic detail. During these months, Annalisa refused to eat. She claimed the demons wouldn't let her. She believed her suffering was a form of atonement for the sins of others, especially for wayward priests and drug-addicted youth. Her body wasted away. She became skeletal, her face gaunt, her eyes sunken. The prolonged physical exertion from the exorcisms, combined with self-inflicted injuries and starvation, took a devastating toll. On July 1, 1976, Annalise Michel died in her sleep. Her last words to Father Renz the day before were, "Beg for absolution." To her mother, she whispered, "Mother, I'm afraid." She weighed only 68 pounds. An autopsy revealed the cause of death was malnutrition and dehydration. She was only 23 years old. The tragedy didn't end with her death. The story became a national scandal in Germany, sparking a fierce debate between faith and science. The state prosecutor launched an investigation, and in 1978, Annalisa's parents and the 2 priests, Father Alt and Father Renz, were charged with negligent homicide. The prosecution argued that Annalisa was not possessed, but was suffering from severe psychosis and epilepsy. They claimed that if she had been force-fed and received proper medical care, her life could have been saved. Her parents and the priests, they argued, had relied solely on religious rites and allowed her to starve to death. The defense, on the other hand, played the terrifying audio tapes in court. They brought in experts who argued that her symptoms, particularly her speaking in different voices and her supernatural strength, couldn't be explained by medical science alone. They maintained that everyone involved, including Annalisa, genuinely believed she was possessed and that they acted out of love and faith, trying to save her soul. The court was faced with an impossible question. Was this a case of religious fanaticism gone wrong, or was there something truly supernatural at play? In the end, the court found all 4 defendants guilty of manslaughter resulting from negligence. However, the verdict was surprisingly lenient. They were sentenced to 6 months in prison, which was suspended, and 3 years of probation. The judge stated that they had already suffered enough. The case left a profound impact on the Catholic Church. The German Bishops' Conference later declared that Anneliese Michel was not possessed, but was mentally ill. The rules for approving exorcisms were made even stricter, and the case became a cautionary tale about the dangers of mixing medical conditions with religious fervor. Today, Anneliese Michel S. grave in Klingenberg am Main remains a pilgrimage site for a small group of believers who see her as an unofficial saint, a martyr who sacrificed her life for the sins of others. The story continues to fascinate and disturb us because it sits right on the edge of our understanding. Was she a psychiatric patient let down by her family and her faith? Or was she a soldier in a spiritual war, a victim of a genuine demonic possession that modern science simply cannot comprehend? The haunting recordings and the tragic photos of her emaciated body are a permanent, chilling reminder of her ordeal. The case of Anneliese Michel forces us to confront our deepest questions about faith, reality, and the existence of evil. The truth, whatever it may be, was buried with her. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a truly unsettling story. What do you believe happened to Anneliese Michel? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video compelling, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more explorations into the unexplained. Stay curious, and we'll see you next time.